of filmmakers from all over, probably, right? The first thing I'm going to do is actually ask them to introduce themselves and where they're from, and then we'll do a deep dive into why they do film and about their films they have here screening at Sugar Falls. So,
hi, I'm Tim Tuttle. The movie is 44 Lights, music from Ground Zero, and I live in upstate New York, just by Woodstock, New York. I used to be living in New York, retired, moved up the river.
I'm Elise Sullivan. I'm from Sugar Falls, or up the road a little bit, and I did the Two Foundation documentary.
Hi, I'm George Pritchard. I directed Hinomaru, Coming Over the Flag, and I'm here from London.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Aguilar. My film is The Prospector, and I'm here from San Diego, California.
So, cheers and welcome to Sugar Falls. So has everyone's films already screened so far?
Mine screened about 2 hours ago.
And that was the first time?
That's the first time I've seen it on a big screen, so yeah.
That's awesome. And does anyone else, are there going to be any more screenings just for anybody watching, just to be able to come?
Mine just screened like 45 minutes ago. I literally came over from that, so.
Did you have a Q&A as well there?
Yes.
So you're going from Q&A to Q&A.
Yes.
Yeah, my film's shown already. Yeah.
My film also screened last night, but I think it's still worth talking about, right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, what I loved is I was looking at what films you guys... Yeah, they're great, but you can't see them, so just trust us. That's right. They'll be available streaming next week, so check back to be able to see everyone's films. So let's just go through the wide array. You guys have such different subject matter that you guys have concentrated on. I'm a filmmaker as well, so I kind of know some of the journey that you've been through, but each of you has a unique story, the way you came into it. If you can talk about your story, I know yours is a long time in the works, probably, correct?
Well, yeah, it all began on the morning of 9/11, 2001. And then it was a musical journey for us to find healing through writing songs about all the friends I had lost that day and coworkers. And so we started doing concerts. We had no intention of making a documentary. For the 20th anniversary, because of COVID, 19th anniversary was done from our basements, and we all collectively sang and played instruments. On the 20th, we figured we're not going to get it, so we went into the Bearsville Theater in Woodstock as a band, and we recorded the entire concert live. And we were just going to show that concert on 9/11 because so many people have been coming to the shows for years. We were just going to put it out, and then they could donate to a charity or something like that if they wanted to do something. And then we got a call from Bearsville about a month before, and they said, you can go on stage, and you can have the state will let you have 150 people. And so we ended up doing the live performance for 150 people. Now we have this concert footage. But we had filmed many of the concerts over the years, over the 20 years. And so we were sitting down the following day, and my wife, who's infinitely smarter than I am, said, we should really do something to tell the story of the journey of how we got here. The catalyst obviously being 9/11 and the pain and loss and the suffering and the holes in our heart and souls. But how to use creativity to communicate loss and to help heal from loss and share that creativity. And one of the things that we have at the very end of the movie is a quote from Kurt Vonnegut. It said, in your lifetime you should paint, dance, laugh, sing, make movies, play guitar, not for fortune or fame, because you want to become something with the universe, something where you share and you tell something and you help make the world a slightly better place. At the very end, I'll just wrap up. A lady walked out of our movie before, and she walked up and she said, I thank you very much. I'm going to go home and go back to painting. I haven't been painting for the last 10 years. And I thought, that's it. So that's what happened from our documentary, which we never intended to make.
Wait, before we go on, just and again, I don't know the full story, but you were in the Twin Towers that morning, right? You worked there. I just want to set up for the audience.
I had worked in both the North and South Towers. I was on the last PATH train from Hoboken, New Jersey, into the tower that morning. I came through at 8:25. I came up to the North Tower, and I was going to pick up my watch from the watch shop there, which is in the South Tower, and I got there, and Unfortunately, the watch shop wasn't going to open till 9, and I knew that I'd been late for work like every day for a week. So I decided I would skip out right across to my building, which is literally right there on the edge of the perimeter of the park. And by the time I had gotten through the park and up the stairs and sat down in my office on the 30th floor, which is basically looks straight at the South Tower, the first plane hit the North Tower. So that, it was picture perfect, the most beautiful, gorgeous, Super 10 blue sky day you could ever see. And everything just went, really bad very, very quickly. And then I made my way down to the North Tower very fast, and I thought I could help. But when I got down there, obviously, the things I began seeing were unexplainable. So I wrote a song that night. When I got home, it took me 9 hours to get 1 mile across the river. Got home, but I was alive. So, and at that point, I was pretty sure many friends of mine were not. I sat down with my wife in the dark, and I picked up my guitar, and I started to sing, "I Can't Explain the Unexplainable." And that became one song. I thought that would be it, but it moved on to something much, much bigger, and, we documented it.
Yeah, so, and thank you for sharing that, because I know how hard that day was, but for you, probably, I can't even fathom, from me being here and knowing people there, but to be where you were. Did you have a musical background? Were you already performing?
No. I knew like 3 chords. No, I say that somewhat dismissively. I had sang in the choir when I was a child. I played guitar. My mother was a very good musician, wonderful singer. And my mother desperately, during my teenage years, wanted me to be creative. She wanted me not to be like my brothers and go into business and do this whole thing. But I fought it because she's my mother and I wasn't going to do anything she said. And it wasn't until I was 42 years old and I watched 2 buildings come down in front of me and 35 people I know didn't come home that I sat down in the dark and started to play my guitar. And for the first time, my wife said later on that it was like I was holding a living, precious thing in my hands. And I couldn't speak about the terror, but I could sing about it. And each song became more of the journey of healing and I'm still healing. Obviously, people suffer from PTSD in a variety of forms, whether or not you're in Baghdad or you're in a car accident or something happens to your family member. These things don't go away, but you can either curl up or you can try to share it. And for us, it became then starting to do concerts every 9/11 and bringing the people along that we knew, several hundred people that would come to every show and be there. And we would remember all our friends and all our family members and everybody that hadn't gotten home. And so the spark was lit for us, technically. That we said, it's not just one song anymore. Let's keep going and let's heal through this, which is really what the story is. The catalyst is 9/11. Like most things in life, you have a moment before and after that will define things in your life. But the story isn't about that. It's about healing. It's about trauma, and it's about expressing yourself and doing something that makes the world a better place.
That's great, yeah. So one song turned into, you said like you recorded 2 albums from that one song?
Three albums, yeah.
3 albums.
40 or 50 songs, plus lots of times just playing by myself or going and recording with just acoustically with the guys as well that are just, could fill multiple CDs as that as well. But that's where my therapy is.
Yeah.
My therapy is in the studio. But no, I was a commodities broker. I retired about 4 years ago, and now I live up. My wife's a writer, and I live up by Woodstock, and I live on a lot of farmland, and I play, and I occasionally go over to Woodstock just to record with some of the guys, and that's my answer to all things.
Yeah, that's great, and I can't wait to see the film because that's obviously such a powerful thing. So moving along, I don't know if we want to just go in order. So Elise, so you are local, correct, and just came from your screening. So yeah, if you can share with that.
So I did a couple years at Kent, and I did their film program. Well, not really, but I was in some film classes, and then I just really wanted to get into film. And so I graduated from Kent in 2020, so COVID. But so I wanted to make a documentary. So I emailed I was like either the Sugar and Valley Little Theater or 2 Cafe. So I emailed both, and Sherry was very gracious and said that I could make a documentary about them. So I filmed it last summer, and then edited it, and yeah. So it took a little bit, but it was a good journey, and I'm new at it, so it wasn't perfect, but I'm glad I did it. So.
There is no perfect, just so you know. Like, anyone will tell you, you can be on your 10th film and you still will look at it and go, I really need to figure this out. I'm sorry, before we turn it over though, why was it important for you to talk about this particular subject matter?
Because I actually get transportation by them, so I don't drive yet. But yeah, so it's, a subject matter that's kind of close to me, so that's why it's kind of important. So.
Nice. All right, and now we go across the pond. So I talked to you briefly before this. You come from legacy. You have a grandfather that was a filmmaker. So if you could talk about the journey of your grandfather, and then obviously the story that you ended up telling in your documentary.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was my great-grandfather was a semi-famous theatre director. He was quite influential in the world of British stage. And he passed away in the 60s, like well before I was born. And the year that I graduated from university in 2017, a Japanese World War II good luck flag turned up in his possessions. And these were called Yosugaki Hinomarus. And you would give them to Japanese soldiers to sort of wish them luck in battle. And many of these flags ended up back in Allied hands as war trophies. So I decided that I should probably try and give this flag back to the family of the soldier that it originally belonged to, kind of as a gesture of reconciliation. And also in a way because it kind of threw my great-grandfather's legacy into question. He was a very kind of humanist, compassionate guy, and the idea of him, looting a dead body or maybe killing someone didn't really align with my perception of him. So that's what the film is about, basically, the process of trying to return that flag to the family.
Now you actually, so can I just ask everybody, who is a full-time filmmaker? Is this, for some people, was it just a hobby, or you do this full-time as well?
I'm moving towards that direction.
So, okay, so you're stepping in that direction, but you've been,
I'm the same, I'm kind of getting there.
Still working on getting there?
Still working on it, yeah.
So was this your first film?
This was my first film out of university, yeah.
Oh, excellent. And same for you?
This was my fourth film.
Your fourth film. All right, so your film, I know, the line that I loved is that there's a donkey named Nugget, and you're telling a story about an age-old time of prospecting. Can you just talk about how did you stumble upon that subject matter and about your film as well?
Yeah, the film was almost named Nugget, to be honest, because every time the camera came on, this donkey named Nugget kept getting in front of the camera, and he was definitely a character in the film. But the film is called The Prospector, and it's a short documentary, and it follows Ernie Laszlo, who is a contemporary gold mining prospector, through preparing for and then competing in the California Gold State Championships for gold panning, which I didn't know existed until I met Ernie. But honestly, I just, the way I find any of my film subjects is just kind of following my curiosity. And I was driving through Placerville, California, and they have one of the oldest hardware stores in California, and they have this whole section that's dedicated to gold panning materials. And I hear you guys have an old hardware store here too that I need to go check out. And I just asked the store manager, who the heck still does this for a living? I know there's a lot of hobbyists that do it, and it's in the 4th grade curriculum in California. So it's still taught and celebrated, but I was wondering if there was anyone who was still doing it for a living, and he said, oh, you gotta talk to Ernie Laszlo. Basically, this is the only guy who still does it. And he gave me his phone number, and I called him up, and he invited me to his bus, his old school bus that he lives in, and introduced me to his pet donkey named Nugget, and then we ended up spending 4 years together making this film.
4 years, really?
4 years, really. Yeah, and I thought it was going to be, less than a year, like all documentaries I make.
So that can't be full time. You're not staying in a bus and
No. I'm checking
donkey.
in with him. Yeah, I'm checking in with him. Lots of phone calls. At that time, I'm originally from South Lake Tahoe, California, which is just a few hours north of Mariposa, California, which is where Ernie lives. And so, just phone calls, checking in with him. I would go film with him every few months, and then, of course, around the gold panning championships, I was with him for about a week as he prepared for it and journeyed to it, and then was competing there, and then followed him home afterwards. So that was kind of the climax of the film and the journey.
Does he find a large nugget, a gold nugget? Is that a
does-
spoiler alert?
He does not in the film, but I was just coming out of making 2 films that were much heavier subject-wise, and I really just kind of wanted to make a fun, quirky documentary about an interesting character doing something interesting. But it really turned into not super heavy, but he had a lot of life lessons to learn. You know, it's not about the gold nugget that you find. It's about being out in nature, and it's about doing what you love. And, you know, he worked in Silicon Valley for many years, before it was Silicon Valley, but as an aircraft mechanic, he had a really great job. And then, you know, found the love for nature and the Merced River, and just kind of left his life and lives off the grid. And he's one of the happiest people I know. And so I think there's a lot of nuggets to get from the film besides the gold.
Yeah. So with all 4 of you, especially being somewhat relatively new to this field, I know a lot of the challenges in making movies is that movies are expensive. Even a small documentary, unless you own your own gear and you're just doing like a one-man show where you're going, because I'm doing one right now, and I know that we stopped so that we can go out and raise money with the teaser that we have. Like, it's an expensive thing. How do you guys navigate that first step in saying, okay, this is something that's worth my time and my efforts to try and raise money and get this up and running? And we'll start with you since you have the mic right now.
Since I have the mic, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I sit with the story for a while to make sure it's something I really care about, because I know that the dedication and time and effort is going to be considerable.
That's great advice, by the way, just to jump in.
Yeah.
So anyone listening that wants to go into film, it's going to take over your life, and so that's very important.
Yeah. So it's like if I'm, you know, thinking about it and sitting with it and like dreaming about it, and then I'm like, okay, I got to take the first step, and, you know, at least calling Ernie, or, you know, whatever the first step is. And then I have 2 other films that are in educational distribution right now that I'm monetizing, that the plan is that those will help sustain my career in making these other projects. And then for Prospector, I actually did a work trade with a cinematographer friend of mine, because I do a lot of editing as well. So I shot most of it on my own, and then there's some beauty shots, which if you're watching the film, you can tell what shots he shot and the ones that I shot, at least I can tell. So we did a work trade for that. So I edited some of his work, and he came out and shot for me for free. And then I will say too, the last thing is that I went to a grad program at University of California, Santa Cruz, that taught you one-man band filmmaking. So it was a social documentary program where if you care about a social issue, you can do pre-production through post-production, distribution, all on your own, and they taught you how to do that, which I definitely don't recommend for career sustainability. But, you know, I could pick up a camera, I can, you know, do all of those things on my own if I have to.
Well, it's good when you're first starting out.
Totally.
Yeah. I made the mistake of sometimes trying to jump into the big ones, and then just found myself constantly trying to, like, swim uphill, you know?
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. So you're out of school now, you find this flag, and you say, okay, I have to tell this story. What's your first step?
Well, I think when we first started, we did kind of want to get some proper funding, obviously. But one of the things they didn't teach us in university was how to get funding. So we really had no idea what we were doing. And, you know, we wanted to get like a proper camera and like good lights and everything, but it just wasn't happening. And the story was kind of unfolding in front of our eyes. So we thought, let's just take the cameras we use, they're not that bad. And, you know, we know people with kit and equipment, and let's just make it. It doesn't matter so much about what we shoot it on at this point. It's more about the story and sort of telling it in a compelling way. So we never did get any funding for that. I just paid for that all for myself, by myself. I worked in the pub kitchen, lived with my parents, and just fronted it all, which I definitely don't want to do ever again.
Yes,
but I probably will, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a dangerous place. Sorry, I just was going to go back to, all right, we can move on.
Oh, okay. For me, I actually had, before I made this, I had bought a lot of film equipment because I knew I wanted to do it. So I actually had a camera already and tripod, so I didn't really have any money for it. So I just filmed it on my camera, and I had some audio equipment that didn't really help because the audio's not great, but yeah, I didn't really have funding for it, so, because I don't know, I wouldn't know how to get funding anyway, because I'm really new at this. I'm still in school, actually. I'm at Tri-C for film, so.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a crazy thing. It's like, okay, you need to go get funding. There's not like a website you go to that just says, hey, go pitch to these people. Like, here's funders. It's something where it's like you have to be connected to somebody or like follow through. You know, that's how I met some of my investors, is that it took me 10 years to get introduced to somebody for them to see my first movie be successful. Then I got a invite to the next pitch, you know, and then they took me more seriously. But it wasn't until the third and the fourth that people were actually writing checks, because we had built up that trust. You know, it's not something that's that easy. I think that's the hardest part of film. It's like everybody has a great story to tell, and if you were just given unlimited funds, you'd be able to go tell amazing films, you know, but a lot of us are trying to do it in a very scrappy way. And again, I always say story is king, so you can overcome some things, again, with your story. You're telling something that's important to you, so that's always gonna trump the production value, but there is a point where, you know, that's, I think, the hardest part for filmmakers, is to cross that hurdle to where you're now having a large sum of money that you can actually use to do the things you want in the way you want to do them, you know? So about your journey, like, obviously it didn't start off as a film.
My journey is a little bit, well, it's a lot different, I guess, in a lot of ways, because I had never intended to make a film. I knew nothing about it. I watched hundreds of music documentaries, and I love documentaries. Ken Burns is like my favorite guy in the whole world, you know? And so because I was a history major at Ohio Wesleyan, so I've always loved documentaries. They're more interesting to me than just about anything I could see. But I spent the first 20 years making music, and in my spare time, most of it was just to go into the studio at night after sitting at the pit for the first 3 years after the towers went down. I was looking into the pit every day, and I watched them bringing out parts, and we would line up at the thing when the police and the firemen lined up. We'd watch them and pull the flags, and everybody in my office. So I announced to my wife, who's really a sweetheart, that I was going to start spending money on my music, which over 20 years turned out to be a considerable amount of money. I never sold a CD. I never, I paid musicians because I wanted to put money back into Tribeca, and because these guys were out of work, you know, for the first couple of years, there was nothing really opening again, and I wanted to spread what I had, what little I had, into the universe. And I told my wife we probably could have, bought a new house, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to help and be part of something, and so I did. So then 2018, I just got up from my desk one day and I called my wife and I said, she was upstate writing a novel. I was down in the city, and I said, I'm quitting. I can't take it anymore. I can't stand this. And she said, good, see you on the next bus. So I walked into my boss and I quit. So, and now I'm out of work. I guess I'm retired essentially. So I went up and I started writing music and hanging out and planning shows and hanging out, and suddenly decided to do a documentary, and I had no idea what that entailed. I don't know about black magic cameras and all this kind of stuff. I just thought Ken Burns walked in with a Kodak and made a film, and that's not even remotely how it goes. Obviously, I have tremendous respect for people that are doing this for real. So I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a little bit to spread, and I filmed the first concert, the 20th anniversary concert. Next thing you know, you're out $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for doing that and putting it all together, and you're like, well, how am I going to do this? So, I called a couple friends of mine that actually came into the show tonight, and I just said, they'd gone to all the shows. They're both at Ground Zero on 11. I said, I'm doing this thing. I've got this story, and you just said something that was really important to me. The story is king. I said, I've got this story. I want to tell the story. The story is really important, but I don't really know how to do it. And they said, we'll kick in something to get you going here. It's like fire starter, and I just went to work for, the last year, almost every day, just working. I got this kid, editor, he lives in Woodstock. He's a young guy. He'd gone to film school, and we just did it all over Zoom. And you know, he basically charged me, probably came out to $20 an hour at the end, and I was checking around in the beginning, and I called one guy, he just made a Porsche commercial in Woodstock. He's like, man, you better come up with like 100K, you want to get me in on this thing? I'm like, dude, I got a story about 9/11, you're talking about Porsches. I mean, doesn't anything sprinkle for you at all? Don't you see something amazingly beautiful? He's like, no, I make Porsche commercials. I was like, okay, fine. So I realized, and I'm just going through the yellow pages, you know, or going on Craigslist, and everybody that's in the Woodstock area is some woman or man that's coming out of the city that's been living in Brooklyn, you know, in a $3 million place, and they've already hit all these home runs in commercials mostly, and they've moved to the area. Now they're looking for some work, but they're not looking for a struggling filmmaker. They're looking for some other guy to come up. Your story's, I don't really know your story as well, but I'm just hearing your story. It's beautiful. I love this story. It's in my life. My father was the same guy as your grandfather, okay? I have these battle things, and I've always wondered who they are. I look at them every day. So, you know, if I had cash, I'd go, dude, I'm in, you know? And so I said to my friends, can you help? And they said, yeah. Well, then it was kind of cool because my family all thought I was nuts. But then after we saw the first things of Music from Ground Zero, my brother calls me on the phone. He goes, well, you never asked me if I could be in, you know? And I said, I don't know, I didn't think you even cared about it. He goes, I just learned something about you in this film that I never knew. And I said, what? He goes, you have a heart. I didn't know that. He goes, we're not that close. He goes, you're a completely different guy. You never came into the concerts or anything. So he said, you know, I'll send you some money and get involved, and we'll see what happens. Now, we have a movie after a year. I've learned a lot that I wish I knew that you guys already know about the process. I wasted a lot of time, a lot of shots. We have like 10 terabytes of stuff on this. I mean, it's just like hard drives loaded up with stuff. Just so much stuff, and I've gotten so many photos and stuff. Like one of the guys that donated a bunch of photos to my movies was the chief forensic photographer of the New York City Fire Department. He's now dying of cancer. He was on the pit in the pile for 3 years. He's dying. So please blank this out if you show this on your website, okay? So he gave this stuff to me, and he said, listen, you can have these photos, even though theoretically I took them all, helicopters and all that, but not necessarily mine. You can have them for free, just make a good movie. So I sent it to him, he's in the hospital, and he said, I love this. And he said, listen, if the NYFD comes after you for this at some point, that means that your movie was seen and somebody liked it. And then you can just negotiate with them.
Yeah.
So, you know, just trying to come up with funds for this must be so difficult when you're young if you don't have anybody that believes in you. And the problem is, somehow you have to find, and you mentioned, like, where do you go? There should be a pool of people that don't have to hear you on the stage right now. You should be able to reach out to people and say, this is what you need to see. Like when I walked out of here before, I had several people say really nice things. One of the guys that flew out here with me to do it, he said, Tim, he goes, it just the first time we ever saw it on a big screen, it looks great. You know, let's go talk about, because we have to open it up. You said 4 years. I've been working a year on this. We're getting ready to do a few more festivals, but I want to tighten certain things that after watching other people's stuff, I realized, oh, mine can be a lot better, you know? But yeah, it's money and it's time. Time I've got a lot of. Money, especially if you don't know what you're doing, you make a lot of mistakes. And it costs you a lot of money to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So.
But that's the best way to learn. The best way to learn is to jump in, because if you don't have a backup plan, you know, you're running like your hair's on fire. That's like when you are forced to do things that you didn't even know you were able to do.
It's a wonderful, it's been a wonderful experience for me. Never thought that this was going to happen or do this, and seeing the people watch it today and then clap afterwards. It's like performing a concert, a live concert, which is to, you know, a few hundred people is wonderful. You know, some people think you have to perform at Wembley or something. You don't. Eric Parker was the drummer for Joe Cocker and Stevie Winwood for over a decade. Played drums for me on the 20th anniversary at Woodstock and came up to me afterwards, and he has played Wembley, amongst other places. He's toured the world probably 50 times. Said to me it was the most important show he'd ever done. Because, and by the way, he didn't take any money for it, okay? He did it for free. You know, he said doing this show was about doing something for people. I wasn't just playing for an audience anymore. I was playing for people that came here to heal tonight on 9/11 on the 20th anniversary. And he said it just meant the world. So, you know, that's part of the dream. And making a great film, and I can't wait to watch it all of yours, is wonderful. You did something. You changed the world.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how just even your film, you had no idea you're all of a sudden in Sugar Falls, Ohio, sitting 2 chairs over from a guy who was like, oh my God, I have this exact same story. Like, that's what I love about what we do. Like, yeah.
Exactly. When I showed my film on Tuesday or Wednesday, there was actually a couple who said that their father had one of these flags, and they were thinking of giving it back, which is quite amazing.
It's the first thing I'm going to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Obon Society. Yeah, do it, man.
I am. I'm hugely inspired by it, and that's beautiful.
Art wins again.
Well, it's what he said earlier, and I get, sometimes it gets a bad rap. People call it new age, but it's the universe, right? It's about our connectivity. So just putting yourself out there is just a way that you have to put yourself out there, and then somebody sees it. That's how you build something, right? So people don't know to help you if you're not putting something out there for them to even see. So this is just like the beginning of a snowball rolling, right? So hugely inspired by everything you guys are doing. What's next? Do you have anything in the works currently?
Yeah, I'm doing a film which is centered around a new production of King Lear at the Globe Theatre in London. Yeah.
I love it.
And I'm getting paid to do that. It's not my first professional directing gig, so it's nice to sort of flip the tables on that.
Nice, congrats.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. I'm working on another film I'm not getting paid for. I actually just finished, when I finished Prospector, I finished another film that's about the mixed martial arts community in South Lake Tahoe. It's a comeback story of someone who got into a fatal car accident. He was the only survivor, and I followed his journey to fight physically and mentally to get back into the ring and fight again. So I promised myself I wouldn't start another film until I really do distribution with that one. So I'm waiting about 6 months, and I'm doing community outreach and impact campaign with that film. It's called Momentum.
Yeah, you can't stop. Like, once you make a film, sometimes it's torture. There's times where I've been flying to like a big premiere at a major festival with a friend, producing partner of mine, where we're sitting there going like, that's stressful. Like, it's not like you're going there to enjoy the festival. You're going there to make sure you coddle your actors, that you get tickets for people that you don't have enough tickets for, so you're waking up early to go stand in line, and we always say, like, when do we stop and get to enjoy this? And then all of a sudden, as soon as it's over, you're like, okay, let's do it again.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
like,
ready, let's go.
Yeah, it's just like a concert, because that's your soul being like, hey, this is what you're here to do.
Totally.
For me, I'm actually currently in school right now at Tri-C. I'm studying film there. So right now I'm just doing that, and I'm working at a Heinen's, which is a local grocery store. So I might, do another film in the summer or something, but we'll see, because right now it's school and work, which is a lot. So
Yeah, you got to focus on your studies. But you do have access to cameras and gear there, correct? So that is a good opportunity to try and get something at a higher production level made while you have those resources.
I'm going to be working on this movie probably till the day I die. So, because now I'm bitten on this one. I had an interesting experience in my life. In '95, my wife and I just got married, and we were out in Northern California. And I had lived in San Francisco for a long time, and I knew some people down at Stanford that used to go see this psychic in Marin. She's a woman from France, unbelievable. So my wife wanted to go see this woman up in the hills and have her tell her about her life. I did not believe in this kind of stuff. So she sat with my wife for an hour. My wife was just blown away when she walked out. The lady walked out onto this deck, and she said, "Would you like me to read you quickly?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was amazing. The first 5 minutes, she got literally everything about me right. And I hadn't said a word. She was just nailing me left and right. It's like she'd been living with me for 20 years or something, And then she looked at me and she said, "Something's going to happen in your life, and you're going to write a book for kids to help them somehow." And I said, "When am I writing this book, and will it sell?" And she said, "I have no idea, but something's going to happen." So I let it go, and 6 years later, 9/11 happened, and I started doing the music, and then now I've done the movie. So what I'm going to do now, because I've spent every day just thinking about all my memories of 9/11, everything that's happened to me every day for the last 20 years, I want to go back and write the book. And I want to write the book because of all the things, all the songs that I wrote and all the lyrics are about all these phases in my life that I had to get through. It's just so hard being a teenager, and then it's hard to go to college, and then it's hard to get a job, and then, a lot of things are difficult, and there's a lot of kids out there that are suffering. I was talking last night to a young man who did 3 tours in Iraq, and he was telling me how hard it was for him to heal from some of the violence that he had seen and been a part of. And he's really trying to work through it. And I was telling him about this book that I want to write that would use 9/11 as my catapult and my catalyst. Because I think there's things I can tell now at my age, back to kids who are 17, 18, 19, to say, listen, man, it's not as hard as it looks. You know, you'll find something, and I think the creative side of it does make it better because you're searching other people and you're searching other things and you're looking deep within yourself simultaneously. But those things need to be shared, and everybody needs to share. We just got to make the world a better place, and it starts with film and novels and everything else, so that's what I'm going to focus on.
Amen. That's awesome. Did you say your wife is a writer? Did she help you at all in the making of your film?
Oh yeah, everything that's good in it is her. Yeah, my wife is she's a great soul, and she essentially directed it. What she let me do each day was let me beat my head against the table and work with this editor on Zoom. And then at the end of the day, she'd go, that doesn't really work. And she goes, here's what I think you should be focusing on. And she had brilliant ideas. And now we're going to go back and crack it open on Monday and start with some of the other things. Because now watching it today, I realized that a couple things that I let out and skipped over a little bit, she was perfectly right about, and they're needed. So, yeah, she's the director. I'm just the guy that was, she wasn't going to sit at a Zoom with me for 10 hours a day. This poor kid yelling at this poor editor.
Did you just admit on camera that your wife was right?
Sorry?
Did you just admit on camera that your wife is right?
Oh, God, right about everything. Yeah, I wish my mother was still alive. I'd like to tell her she was right about everything as well. That might be one.
All right. I don't know how much time we have. Do you guys have any questions in the audience that you wanted to ask from hearing these stories?
Yeah, I think one of the things you find as you get older is you start to look at your life and go, did I live it? Did I make a difference? Did I really go for it? And all those types of things. And Tim and I were talking a little bit about that. And I think a lot of times in life you're waiting for the knock on the door or somebody to tell you this is what you need to do or what you need to go after. And so I think for a lot of you this is really the beginning of a big change in your life if you continue to go for it. Because I think the other thing about going for it is it's easy to have the idea one day and then the next day go, oh, it's hard, or this isn't going to work, or I'm going to do something else. And so as I listened to each one of you, there's two things I was thinking about. One of them is what was the moment, do you remember the moment when you thought, this is going to change, I'm going to do this? And then the second moment was you sort of said, I really think I can do this. I think I'm on my way. Do you all remember that, or where you were, or when it happened?
Yeah, here, I'm going to rephrase that just because I think for the camera I need to sort of set the table. But where you started with that, I was going to follow up with the question that you asked, which is there is always that aha moment where you suddenly think, I remember mine clearly, but it's not about me today. But for you guys, was there a moment where you thought, I want to do film, this is what I have to do with my life, and when did you realize that you had the courage or decided to take the plunge to actually say, okay, I'm going to do this?
For me, it was taking the film classes at Kent, because before Tri-C, I actually went to Kent for 4 years. I wasn't in the film program there, but I did take film classes, and I really enjoyed them. So I was like, oh, I want to do this. And then when COVID happened and I was got a job, I was like, well, I want to try film. So I just tried it over the summer and it panned out pretty well, I think.
Yeah, and during COVID, that had to be the strangest time to have to make that plunge.
A little after COVID too. It was mixed in with 2020, 2021, but the time I actually did
there was
it,
a big year and a half gap. Yeah,
Yeah.
No one even knows if it's officially over, but I feel like we're all just sick of it, and we're like, yeah, I remember COVID. I remember when that was a thing. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I've wanted to be a filmmaker since I was really young. So it's always kind of been there. So I kind of realized recently that I can't do anything else, really. So I have no choice in the matter. I have to make films if I want to be, fulfilled and happy. I don't. It's kind of something that I'm compelled to do, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I literally could not do anything else. Yeah. I had to have my father-in-law do my bathroom tiles this morning as I sat there with a vacuum cleaner, because like I can't even fix anything. There's one choice for me, and that was filmmaking, and that was it. But you came up. I'm a lot older than you. We didn't have cell phones. Like, did you find growing up, did you have more access to be able to use cell phones and, you know, actually shoot some stuff and edit before other people might have that opportunity in the past?
Sorry, what's the question?
About just you growing up in an era of cell phones, like smartphones, where you can, those are literally now like 4K cameras, they shoot in 60 frames, you know. Did you, since you knew you loved doing film from an early age, were you already filming stuff and making little movies as you grew up?
Yeah, well, I guess I was a bit before iPhones when I was a kid, but I had just like a bit of a rubbish camera that my parents got me. And I just went from there, really. And yeah, I guess it's like being exposed to lots of films as well. I had a huge video collection. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, well, just for reference, like I've been doing film for 21 years. My like 12-year-old nephew one day sent me a video that was better than anything that I had done up until that point in my career, and I was like, what is happening? I knew that my time was limited. Like, I'm going to be out of a job very, very soon, because so many kids have grown up with cell phones that can literally edit on the cell phone, and they can add music, and yeah, so I know that this is like my swan song. I got maybe like a year left.
Oh, no. My journey also started when I was young. My dad filmed like everything when I was growing up. And later on in life, I looked back at the footage, and it was actually really special moments that he would capture. Like, there were the dance recitals and the soccer games and everything, but then he would like do fly on the wall stuff, like put the camera up when we were having family dinner and stuff like that, like really special, intimate moments that I just cherish now. And then so I always, you know, had a video camera all through high school, and all of that was kind of filming everything. And then after undergrad, I actually joined the Peace Corps. And I was in a really remote village in Panama on an island with an indigenous community. And I was trying to, you know, I was just falling in love with my work and my community there, and trying to communicate with my family back home what I was experiencing and what the life was like, and getting really frustrated that they didn't understand because it was just so foreign to them. So I started making short documentaries to, you know, this is Roberto, this is the teacher I've been telling you about, this is what the life looks like here, you know, this is how we make a dugout canoe, this is what we're eating, and I would post them to my blog every month. Very amateur, you know, it's like hard to even look back at them now, but that's where I really saw kind of the power of telling these stories and breaking down barriers and creating these, you know, friendships across borders. And then I started applying to programs that would teach me how to do, you know, this social documentation type movement, and that's kind of been my way of, you know, if I care about an issue, then I can make a film about it. But yeah, it all started in the Peace Corps.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I didn't start out as to make a film, really. So I did meet a young man named Robin Richardson, who became our editor. You know, like I said before, I couldn't afford the big names that were floating around our area. But this young man was looking for work. He'd gone to film school. He was an insanely hard worker. He sort of looked up to me as like his father, almost, I think, in ways that he didn't mind if I yelled at him, because mostly I was really yelling at myself about things. But he just took it all in. He knew so much about what we were trying to do, and he really loved the story. His father is British, and his mother's Polish. They had made a documentary in Poland, and we're going back to make one after the war in Ukraine started. And so he was doing it over here. And when I pitched it to him the first day after he'd come to see our concert, I met him out in the parking lot, and I said, "This is what I want to do." And he looked at me in the eye, and he said, "I'm only 28, but you have to trust me on this one." He said, "I realize that this movie is your baby, and I will do everything you say, and I'll let you go through the mistakes. I'll try to tell you when I think you're doing something incorrectly, if you're making a bad decision, and I'll work with you together." So we ended up working, he and I, 88 days, basically. Most of those were consecutive, too, before we took our first break. And just all day long. We really got to know each other quite well. And his passion for movie making as a young guy was really brilliant, and really, really impressive and really inspiring. And I would say you guys are really lucky in a lot of ways that you have found what you want to do early in your life. I didn't. I was a renegade for a long time. You know, I was making money on Wall Street and basically acting like a jackass. And you know, I met my wife finally in my late 30s, and she saw something in me that I refused to see, and she slowed me down hard. And I started to learn that life was a little different than I saw. It was a little less superficial, a little less materialistic, a little, you know, I started to recalibrate my life. And 9/11 obviously hit, and everything changed after that for me. I just woke up from my world of naivety and bliss and said, holy shit, these guys aren't coming home. So in the 20-year process of doing the music, eventually I got to the point where I would sit in the office and all I was thinking about was music. I was writing lyrics, I was doing things. I wasn't doing my job at all anymore. And I was working on a trading desk, and people were screaming at me, and I was gone. I mean, I just didn't care about numbers anymore. I cared about creating. So I got lucky, you know, after we did the concert and the kid was in the parking lot, just happened to be in the parking lot. It's like, boom, intervention. Look at this kid. So you got a nice camera. What do you do? I'm a filmmaker. Really? Got a real job right now? Not really. Need work? Yeah. Can you come along? Can you really sit with me and do this? He goes, I'll give you the next year, man. You know? And I went, wow, this is really cool. And now that I've gotten to this point in this movie, although we're gonna open it up and start shooting again on Monday and do a couple of things for the next festival. We're on our way to another festival in Delaware. I realize I'm kind of addicted now. That it's really beautiful to look at the precision and the transformation that you can create telling a story, even when you can't tell everything in the story. But you picking out the parts that you know are the ones that will get a person to watch it and start thinking about their world. And that's really cool. I'm so happy and so blessed to be at your grand, and I'm so unbelievably happy to meet people here you guys are way ahead of me, but I know where you are now. I know what you're doing, and that's important to me. I learned a lot.
That's awesome. Any more questions from the audience?
I have a question about funding. When you talk about people funding your movies or giving you money to help you do your movies, are they expecting a return on their investment? Or I'm just wondering how much money there is in a 25-minute documentary film.
Yeah, so I've worked on a lot of features, and when we pitch, I make movies where I'm expecting, you know, the investors are expecting a 20% return plus hopefully more. Okay. I don't know what the market is for short films. A lot of times they can be helped by grants. I know that. There's all kinds of routes you can go, but I mean, I'll ask you guys that. Like, is there a way to make money on doing short films?
I think it's different for every project. And every project that I work on, I kind of approach it in a different way, depending on the subject matter. My first two films, I was fortunate enough to get California Humanities grants because they very much aligned with what they were looking to support at those times. But yeah, as far as private funding goes, I feel like, at least for the work I do, that can be commercially viable, but you know, finding the right partner, you have to agree on like the themes and the purpose and the motivation behind the film. And there's a lot of like, you know, they have to have the right heart and not necessarily assume that there's going to be a financial output from the film. But there's also agreements that are made for if and when money comes in, you know, the waterfall will go back to pay the investor with a percentage on top of anything else. So yeah, from my experience, it's very much like each film is different and the contract can look different, but you know, I never promise anyone any sort of return. And so that's kind of like the first initial conversation that happens is like, we're making this film and we're hoping that it goes, you know, to Netflix or that someone buys it and it makes a lot of money, but we're also really hoping to make impact and create awareness. And so the philanthropic part of it is much more important.
You're actually trained not to say you can make 20%. You know, they're basically in the wording that you're trained to say from day one is, you know, you might lose your money. You have to be willing to accept that you might lose your money. I was super cocky, so I would always say I can guarantee this. Like I really had that mindset and that belief. until it didn't happen one time, and it humbled me. But yeah, it's different for every film, I guess. It just depends, you know.
I'll say too that sometimes the issues with grants is that the cycle is so long, and with nonfiction filmmaking, the story's happening. So you may apply for a pre-production or production grant. By the time you hear back, you're already well into post-production. And you kind of have to keep, run and gun following the story as it happens, or otherwise the story won't be there. So the grant cycle and it's also very laborious to write and apply for grants, especially when you're a filmmaker and not a writer. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure we're probably at our time. I just want to thank you guys all for being here, for sharing your stories. I think it's super inspiring, and I hope people will check out their movies online starting next week, and hopefully follow your films. I'm sure everybody has some kind of social media presence where they can find you and make sure that they're following you and supporting you. So thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.